We are now in the second half of the season. Matchday 18 is obviously where everything refreshes, and we're now in the business end of the season, and it's time to look back at everything that happened. So the first game has proved to be the most influential in terms of aftermath. So it was Werder Bremen versus Eintracht Frankfurt on Friday night, and it was really typical how Frankfurt they took the lead in the first minute through Arno Calamundo. Bremen then equalised. Frankfurt then took the lead again through Nemandi Collins. Bremen then equalised again and then looked like they won the game. And then in the 94th minute, Frankfurt equalised. So they threw away the lead twice and needed a late winner to rescue 1 point. And what this has meant, and the outcome of this, is Dino Topmöller has finally been sacked. I think it's safe to say that this was quite obvious that this should have happened quite a while back. I mean, Frankfurt have the worst defence in the league at the moment, and they're 7th, which should really tell you everything you need to know. Defensively, they're just a mess. Goalkeeper doesn't help. Both Kawa Santos and former Bremen player Mika Zetterer aren't that good. I've been of the opinion, obviously, he's going to go to Girona, but I think it would have been beneficial for everyone if Marc-Andre ter Stegen would join Frankfurt on loan. They're a Champions League team. He's back in Germany. Granted, I think his children live in Catalonia still. He's right in the view of Julian Nagelsmann, so he'll be able to play his way back into the starting 11 for Germany. And he brings experience, and he's probably a better goalkeeper than both Santos and Zetterer. But alas, he's instead heading to Girona, allegedly. But obviously this game resulted in the sacking of Dino Topmöller. This is the 4th head coach to have lost or to have failed to beat Bremen and have been sacked. This season. It started with Erik ten Hag at Leverkusen, Gerardo Seoane at Gladbach, Paul Simonis at Wolfsburg, and now Topmöller. But as has been pointed out plenty of time, Frankfurt's issues were so obvious back in November time. You know, that they were okay, they were fine going forward, apart from when Jonathan Burkhardt was injured, so then they didn't really have a striker, which obviously they've addressed now. But it was so obvious in defence, they were just so gung-ho, and it just backfired all the time. And that's what happened here. And so now, obviously, who's going to replace him? Who's going to replace Topmöller? I think in terms of the impact that Topmöller's had, you can't really discredit what Topmöller's done. I mean, in the 2 full seasons he was in charge, dealt a dodgy hand in the first season when Rando Kolo was sold on deadline day in that summer. Does okay, you know, there's a few issues. Second season allows Omar Mamouche to probably have the best half season of his career, gets sold. Allows Hugo Ekitike to have the best season of his career, he also gets sold. But then they also make the Champions League for finishing in the top 4, which obviously credits what Tottenham's done. Big change over the summer, Ekitike leaving, loads of players come in, all of them basically attackers, and it just hasn't worked. Whatever Tottenham was trying to cook, it didn't work. I mean, as I've said previously, you know, as I said before Christmas, at the winter break, Topmöller should probably be sacked then. I still do think there are question marks now about Dino Topmöller. If there weren't before, there should be, because Frankfurt have the 2nd worst defence in the league. They're lucky because of Heidenheim, especially because they conceded 4 to Bayern. It's quite obvious that defence is a problem for them. Either they're doing work on the training ground and it's not working, or they're just neglecting it and going, you know what, let's just do vibes and we'll just ride it out and hope we score more than them. Because it's just not working. And if Topmöller is... if he's not aware, there's a problem. But if he is aware and he's trying to fix this and this is not working, then you've really got to put things into consideration. I mean, when it comes to the tactic of you score, we score more, obviously what doesn't help Frankfurt is the likes of Canuzin is still coming back from his injury. Jonathan Burkhardt is injured as well, which is obviously why they're going to invest in strikers in the winter. But they still need defensive-minded players, a midfielder, like I said before, a defender. They need to invest in these type of players, more the defensive-minded ones, because as things stand, because of Frankfurt's volatility when it comes to their defending, they're slowly drifting away from the European places. And again, like, even attack is a struggle at the moment with the absentees. And if you're not able to find a solution with your current set of players, then that's also a bit of a question mark. Because then it gives the new manager enough time to come in and embed their ideas before the season starts again. And this is something I've noticed, how German teams are horrible at sacking head coaches, like the timing of it. I mean, we're a week into the restart of the season and Topmüller's already been sacked. You could have done this before Christmas and brought in the new guy, and then everything would be fine. I mean, it's not just Frankfurt, it's a bunch of other teams as well. You know, they sack a head coach the game after the return from an international break, for example. And then you've got like 3 weeks of games until you actually have time with whoever is left during the international break. But now, who is going to replace Topmüller? We could see the return of Marco Rose. Obviously, he's been without a job since leaving Leipzig last year. Obviously, Rose needs a bit of career rehabilitation because he did okay at Leipzig, he flopped at Dortmund, and so his stock hasn't really been that high. I mean, since he was at Gladbach, and I think taking this step could be beneficial for him because it gives him a crop of young players to work with, and like this team is primed to play like attacking football. Well, we know that, but like, and he should be able to at least help them understand how to defend. Other head coaches are the likes of Sandro Schwarz. He's not good enough. And then Edin Terzic, who is the complete opposite and more defensive-minded than he is being able to attack. And it would be horrible if you're Ansgar Knauf and you're seeing either Rose or Terzic linked to the job. But I think whoever Frankfurt hires, it will be interesting. I mean, as we said before, they've got a good squad. It's just everything else kind of just, or like how they're set up and stuff is not working at the moment. And so if someone can find that and help them close the gap on Europe again, then things could get a bit interesting. On Saturday, it was Borussia Dortmund versus St. Pauli. A typical Dortmund performance here. They took a 2-goal lead through Julian Brandt and Karim Adeyemi, who both scored and assisted. They then threw away the 2-goal lead. And so it was like Groundhog Day, basically. In the first game of the season, Dortmund threw away their lead to end up drawing with St. Pauli, and a late penalty in that game decided that. This time they threw away the 2-goal lead, and the late penalty nearly decided it, or it did decide it again. But this time, it was in the favour of Dortmund, and they really rode their luck in this game with that penalty. So it's awarded to Dortmund after Ricky Jade Jones, who was actually scored the second goal for St. Pauli, gave away a penalty, upstepped Emre Can, and he scored the winner. But again, you know, like, Dortmund won a game which maybe they were more destined to lose. But, you know, the limitations of Kovac ball are once again on show. Like, Dortmund should have won this game a lot more comfortably, but again, they make it too hard for themselves. And it nearly backfires. But I suppose if you're a Dortmund executive, I mean, this is perfect. You now have a 6-point lead over third. So there's no way that you could drop out of the top 4 and miss out on Champions League football. You know, what? Wow, it's... Again, like I said what I said about Dortmund in midweek. Like, they're boring. This style of football's not going to win you anything. Especially with, and we'll get to it, how Bayern are playing. And you're really just wasting your own time doing this. The biggest game in this afternoon in terms of like league placement was Hoffenheim versus Bayer Leverkusen. Hoffenheim won this 1-0. I think they're now 6 games unbeaten at home. That win does move them into the Champions League places and now third with a game in hand. Obviously, they were kind of gifted the goal by Mark Flecken, who had a massive howler. Like, it's a free kick from Wouter Berger, it's flung in and it just kind of loops over Flecken. Now obviously Flecken has been a solid goalkeeper at times for Leverkusen this season, but that's not a good look with that. And again, it just shows like Leverkusen were not really able to challenge Hoffenheim. Like Hoffenheim were the better team here, and I think that should kind of tell you everything you need to know. And again, it's back-to-back poor results for Leverkusen too. They obviously didn't play in midweek, but they lost at the weekend, and the weekend before that they lose to Stuttgart as well, and so then they've dropped down to 6th, especially when everything was going so well for them just before the winter break. It's just kind of, they've hit a buffer in the past 2 games. It hasn't obviously helped that they've had players away from AFCON, like Ibrahim Marza, for example, but he should be back now for the next game against Bremen, and then we shall see what happens there. Elsewhere on Saturday, Hamburg drew 0-0 with Gladbach. Somehow Hamburg did not score in this game. They had 25 shots, 12 on target. Gladbach goalkeeper Moritz Nicholas made 12 saves. But if you look at the shots map and like the XG these shots produced from Hamburg, they're all quite low effort ones. What that means is basically they weren't really going to challenge Nicholas, so most of the time it was stuff that would have been saved. I mean, quite a lot of them were from outside the box too, so they were just kind of taking pot shots, hoping something would work out. But yeah, again, Hamburg have only lost 2 of the last 5 games, but they've drawn 2 of those as well, and maybe they should have done better, or they should have won this game for sure. I think Hamburg's problem is they are shown that they're good enough to stay up. They just need to be more clinical and actually show that they can like score. And then that should help them, because they are one of the lowest scorers in the league. It doesn't help when like your talismanic striker of the Zweite Bundesliga, Robert Glatzel, is not the same after an injury, and then you're relying on Ransford, Königsdörfer, Jean-Luc Dompe, Damien Downs, who is, although a striker, not a senior one. This is kind of what ends up happening. Cologne beat Mainz 2-1. They end a winless run of 8 games. The last game they won was actually against Hamburg back in November. It's a Ragnar Acker double. He didn't actually start this game either, and he subbed on and rescued Cologne. And so that does give some breathing room for Cologne, and more specifically Kwasniok, who has been getting a lot of flack lately. I mean, again, like there was questions about him benching Elmala. Elmala started this game. Then Mainz themselves are also showing signs of improvement. Obviously, they didn't win this game, but they're no longer at the bottom of the table, but they are still 4 points of safety and Augsburg. Well, fellow relegation strugglers Heidenheim drew 1-1 with Wolfsburg. I mean, there's not really a lot to say from this, I'll be honest. So we're just going to move on already, because there's a more important game to address. So on Saturday afternoon or evening, it was RB Leipzig versus Bayern Munich. Obviously, this game was the Bundesliga opener this season. It ended 6-0 to Bayern. And the first half, completely different game to this. It was end-to-end, and Leipzig really took the game to Bayern. I think the best way to describe it was a basketball game. It was back and forth throughout, and Leipzig had the best chances. Romelu opened the scoring when he scored from a David Raum cutback. But just before that, Leipzig had a chance cleared off the line. Antonio Nusa, just after Leipzig scored, was played through and was one-on-one more or less, and skied it. And so against Bayern, these are the type of chances you go, we may regret those. But for what this first half did show and suggest to me that the likes of Nusa, Yandi Mande and Romelu, quality-wise, are better than the likes of Xavi Simons, Benjamin Sesko and Lois Openda. Yeah, I just think as a collective they work a lot better. They're a lot more in tune with one another. They're a lot more well-rounded with one another. And maybe just the style of play is a lot better as well. It also shows how far away the first game of the season was, with the fact that both Simons and Openda were still Leipzig players when that happened. But as this happens, obviously, you will live to regret those chances that you missed against Bayern. Just after half-time, Serge Gnabry makes it 1-1, and you're thinking, okay, here we go. Michael Olise then subbed on and completely changes the game. I mean, he assists just before Bayern scored a second. Leipzig have a good chance to take the lead from Romelu. but he shoots straight at Manuel Neuer. And again, like Neuer's like officially unk, and like he really goes from games of being absolutely crap, like in midweek, to games where he, like, you could say won Bayern the game, and technically you could say that here because he made key saves in crucial moments of the game like this, and one from Jan Diamande too, like just after Bayern has scored. But as I said, Michael Olise came on and completely changed the game. He assists Harry Kane's goal to make it 2-1. Actually, Kane was very quiet in this game. Like, he was so ineffective. And that second goal was just horrific defending from Leipzig. No one closed any Bayern play down. No one closed Olise down. And then to make matters worse, when the cross is played in, Riedel Baku slips. And then Leipzig, after they missed the Jan Diamande chance, they just basically collapsed. And then Bayern blow them away, scoring 3 goals in 5 minutes. Pavlovic, Olise, and Jonathan Tah too. To make matters worse for Leipzig, the game was so dead that Jamal Musiala was able to be subbed on, make his comeback from his injury, and also provide the assist for Elise's goal. So overall, like, Bayern were ruthless. Like, to come from behind in the second half and score 5, obviously fair enough. And you know, maybe, just maybe, I have a slight hunch this Bayern team could be the best in Europe. Obviously, they've already played PSG and Arsenal this season in the Champions League. They beat PSG, and then against Arsenal, you're playing like a footballing terrorists, which is quite hard. Leipzig will look at themselves and go, if we took those chances in the first half, we could have won this game. And then they just collapsed, basically, and the Bayern just were ruthless and completely dominant of them. And as I said previously, like, is this a good look for the Bundesliga? Not really, no. But it also just shows how the quality that Bayern have at the moment, how good they actually are, the level they're at. They should win the treble, frankly. If they don't, then it's a bad look on everyone here. It's a bad look on Bayern, it's a bad look on the Bundesliga. It's probably also a bad look on me somehow. But, you know, the Bayern team is good enough to win all 3 trophies, and no one can really come close to them. Their lead with Dortmund stays at 11 points, which hypothetically, it's still possible to catch up for them, but that would require Dortmund to be able to close the gap on Bayern, which no one has faith in, and Bayern to have a collapse, which, considering the way they're playing at the moment, you don't expect to happen either. So I think come the real business end of the season, so April, May time, I think it will be interesting to see if Bayern get matched up against the likes of Arsenal again, because if they do, I think it will make an interesting game, and both teams will probably be in 2 completely different points of their season by that point. Then Sunday saw Stuttgart and Union draw 1-1. Both teams will be unhappy with this result. Both had their fair share of chances. I mean, there was an article that Andrej Ilic was one of the most wasteful finishers in the league, and he proved that in this game when he was one-on-one with Alexander Nubel and he hit the post. While Friedrich Ronno made several good saves to keep out Stuttgart, most notably Dennis Undav in the first half. Chris Führich scored for Stuttgart, and then ex-Stuttgart player Wu Yong-jong scored the equaliser quite late on. And so I think overall, Stuttgart will be the unhappier team due to the fact that they conceded within the final 10 minutes, and due to the race for Europe, they do lose a tiny bit of ground. Granted, they're still 4th, but that is because Leipzig, Leverkusen have games in hand on them. So yeah, and then the final game of the game week was Augsburg versus Freiburg. Augsburg, it finished 2-2. Augsburg threw away a 2-goal lead. Alexis Claude-Maurice scored the opener, and then Elias Rexabai scored just after 2 minutes later. So basically, both teams scored within 2 minutes of one another. Yuto Suzuki then got one back for Freiburg, and then Freiburg scored the second, which was a bit of a strange process of play. It was a corner played in, headed towards the goal line. Mikhail Gregorich handles the ball like Luis Suarez-esque in the 2010 World Cup, but it's parried out to a Freiburg player, and Igor Matanovic turns it in to make it 2-2. So Gregorich is normally he was yellow carded for that handball. But it's like the most blatant handball ever that would usually get you a red card, but because obviously Freiburg scored the rebound, he was kind of let off from that. Now for Augsburg, obviously they would have probably liked to have held on to this 2-goal lead, because granted they still have it helped them gain a little bit of breathing room on the relegation places, but you would like a bit more breathing room. Well, Freiburg, probably wish they did a bit more to close the gap on the European places. I mean, if you look at considering how bad Augsburg are, if you look at the XG table, they're 17th. So the fact that they're 15th at the moment is significantly beneficial to them. Speaking of the table, as I said, Bayern at first, 11 points clear of Dortmund in second, Hoffenheim at third and Stuttgart fourth, Leipzig at fifth and Leverkusen at sixth. As I said, both of those two teams have games in hand from the ones that was postponed last weekend and in midweek. While at the bottom, it's St. Pauli who are dead last, Mainz 17th. Well, St. Pauli aren't dead last, they're both on 12 points, and Heidenheim are 16th on 13 points. This weekend, the biggest game is between St. Pauli and Hamburg. The Hamburg derby, it's at the Milan-Tor. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if Alexander Blessin is sacked if Hamburg loses game, or if St. Pauli loses game, I mean. The other games are Bayer Leverkusen versus Werder Bremen, which real ones, remember, cost Erik ten Hag his job. Bayern play Augsburg, Frankfurt against Hoffenheim. Frankfurt should have their new head coach by then, and Union Berlin play Borussia Dortmund. While on Sunday it's Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Stuttgart and Freiburg versus Cologne. So let me know what you think about the weekend, about the games, who could replace Dino Topmüller as the Frankfurt head coach, for example, and just things like that, really.